In this video, just wanted to demonstrate some of the functionality of the estimate reports available in Microvellum. So what I've done is just created a little project with a couple of items in it here, and just go ahead and process those to a work order. So now if we open up that work order, we can see if we go to our reports. So we haven't actually processed anything through the machines yet. This is all based on the machining that's available in this work order, that's included in this work order. So the number of drills, lineal feet of edge banding, all those things are based on the processing of the work order, so they don't need to be assigned to the workstations. They can print them right away. So there's both cost, labor, and quote reports. So we'll look at the cost report here, and that just gives a cost for the project or this work order based on the material costs as well as the labor costs that are coming from these different things. So here's our materials, and then we get into labor for all the different components to give us a total for that. Now with this report, we can modify it right on the fly here. So if you wanted to update this report and use it as an estimate, you can put the graphics, the markup information, the overheads, all the details can be right on this report, and then you can include these different components on the report as well to show. So right now they're all showing, and we can see our markup and our overhead values on there to give us our total project price for this work order. So now if we go look at the labor report, so this is going to give us the labor values based on those same calculations, and so we can see how many minutes of office labor we have, the panel cutting for the lead-in and lead-outs, so just based on the geometry of our routing operations, then we can see that we have panel cutting, vertical drilling, horizontal drilling, and then we have regular routing. And so if you're running with different speeds, you can see those things. And then we have our labeling labor. So if you're assigning labels or automatically labeling parts, then you can include time for those operations as well. Then you have edge banding based on the lineal meters of edge banding in this case. For the metric, this is lineal meters, it would be linear feet otherwise. And then we have some finishing information if they apply. Assembly, hardware assembly, so we can attach hardware labor to each of the hardware items now as well. And so then you can see the count and the time that's included in there. And then we have product handling and installation to give us a total number of project minutes as well as hours. The material costing report just gives us the cost for just the material without the labor. And the quote report would be a document that you would give to the final customer to have all the information about the project as far as the totals, the quote information, overall details, and then the specs that you want to include, terms and conditions, all those sorts of things that you would give to your end customer. You can include those things in this report as well with that same calculation that we have on the other reports. Now the beauty of these reports is that there's not any data that really needs to be added to the products in order to calculate this. It's based on the actual drilling, routing, edge banding that's applied when the work order is processed. And so we have a count of all the drill drops, how many feet of routing, how many lineal meters of edge banding, all that sort of thing is gathered in order to give a total in labor for those operations. Now, as far as how that's done and how it's set up, if we go to our toolbox setup, we'll go to our edit existing work order to access the processing stations directly from there. So we'll open up our work order. And if we go to our activity stations, we can see all the different activity stations that are set up. And these are the ones that are created for this report specifically. And so we can see our cutting operation, and we can see how many units of factory time are used for each of those things. So here we can see for our part cutting, we have a lineal meter based value, and so it's 5 lineal meters per minute of factory time is how that's set up. And so we have a labor rate, and so we can adjust those values for each of our different workstations and give us our calculations that come together on that report. And so here you can see all of our different stations that have different values for the time that's required at those stations and the units that are used in order to calculate those different things. So if we look into the details of the report here, just to see how that data is collected, it is based on the station number. And so if you're modifying those activity stations, you want to make sure that you're doing that accurately here. So the station number value is equal to 102 in this case. And so that corresponds to the station numbers that are in those items. So here you can see each one has its own station number, and that's where it's gathering the information from. And so you can see which activity stations are being used by those items, and that's how it's calculating which activity station belongs to which one. You can see here it's doing a count of how many vertical drills there are, for example. When it comes to routes, you can see how many lineal meters or feet of route is included, and that's how it's doing its calculation, is based on the activity station number that's being used and then the actual value for the quantities coming from the work order. And so looking back at our activity stations here, we can see this is that activity station number that's being used. And so our units per minute of factory time are being gathered here, and our labor rate. So those are the things that we'll want to adjust in order to gather the information for this report. So because this report is not based on library data or any of that sort of information, it's fairly simple to set up. We need to set up some activity stations and adjust the values to match the customer specific needs, but it can be used with a variety of applications, just using the activity station set up here.